Yes, so once again, the code is 9876132. Okay, so we'll be starting with questions. We don't have any questions on Slido yet, so maybe from audience, anyone would like to ask questions? Anyone's pocket?
Thank you for the amazing presentations. It was really interesting. The future of omics is truly now. I think omics could really, and personalized medicine could really help the patients in pharmacy. But I have some questions regarding it. I think that diabetes and all the personalized medicine around diabetes and around cancer is truly good. But I think it would generate like a huge amount of information, a huge amount of patient data. What will you do with it? For example, in Coda, what would you say to your clients? Your clients will do with all those data on privacy notice and on confidentiality wise. For example, false positives. For example, data leaks to insurance companies or family diseases that maybe they don't know yet about and maybe they won't inherit and stuff. Like ethical seeing how would Encoda tackle this problem.
That is a great question. So in CODA, we are more of an educational organization, so we ourselves are not necessarily collecting data, but I know in the oncology space, our members are all in practices, so we're about 60% community oncology and about 40% in academic health systems. And I know most of our centers have genetics counselors, so they are really the ones who, when this data comes and the patient gets a test, so it's going through the results with the patient. Because it is like you said, if they have something that could affect their family, different things, they're going through all of that. We really rely on our genetics counselor in this case to go through it. And I think in clinical trials, all of that data, then we're using that for our education, but not necessarily patient data that we are collecting as an organization.
Okay, thank you. I've also noticed that we have one question on Slido. How safe is to use the microbiome as a marker of personalized medicine if it's if it always changes from June?
I'm not sure to understand the question. How safe is microbiome based therapy?
How safe is it to use the microbiome as a marker of personalized medicine if it always changes?
Yeah, okay. So we know that microbiome is permanently evolving. But in fact, in sick people, we have a common structure that is almost stable. So, of course, we know that it is remodeling in response to some factors. And the complexity in this kind of therapy is to know and to identify all the factors that can impact the microbiome-based medicine in order to adapt the treatment according to these different factors. So how safe it is? It is safe if we have in mind all the factors that can impact the metabolism of the drugs. Um, it is not safe if we don't know all the factors, obviously, but currently the factor of interest in this kind of personalized medicine is to know if the individual presents disease, if you use some drug medicine in parallel, and in function of all these elements, we can adapt microbiome-based therapy. So it is safe if we don't have, if we have enough parameter and factors around them.
Okay, thank you a lot. So maybe now question, what do you think are the biggest challenges in terms of omics and the use of omics? And maybe we'll start from the other side, from Dr. Rodriguez now.
In my opinion, in such systems where we gather more and more data and we're in the process of transforming them to information and to have a decision making on this information, it would be not actually the bioinformatics part of this work or the state of the art of the technology, but rather to what extent we can, as health professionals and scientists in general, work in between, collaborate between different groups and different communities and have a great flow in the exchange of information so that out of this massive data, we can actually be led to decisions that can make an impact. So this is, in my opinion, the greatest challenge this time that we're talking about, and not actually the specialization in certain techniques, actually the technical part, either the scientific or the IT part of these techniques. Is how do you see actually the value in this information, and this is something that critically needs multi-collaborational fields, and as in the industry, of course, we are dealing the same. We can see it 100%. There has to be an ecosystem that interprets such data and combines data in order to be driven to effective solutions for human health.
Thank you. I would like to ask you, are there any questions from the audience? You can put your hand up high so that we can see you.
Hi, I have a question about the personalized medicine. To what extent can we personalize it so it's affordable for the patient? Because as we personalize it, it is more expensive. And is it only sorry, is it only applicable on the oncology side or on different personalized
Okay.
I can start with reference to the oncology side, and then others may have more to add. I do know that it is bigger than just oncology. Some of our health systems now have pharmacogenomics partnerships that are just in general. So they are doing a lot of testing to see, if the patient may metabolize certain drugs well or not well. And they have entire departments that are devoted to it. But as far as oncology, we do have a lot of insurance companies in the U.S. And again, this may be specified to the U.S. in our healthcare system, but they are covering it. So it isn't a huge expense for patients as long as the insurance will cover it. I will say, as far as some of the challenges, we do see a lot of disparities still in that area. There, especially with clinical trials in the U.S., we've not seen maybe an equal population of all of our citizens represented in clinical trials, so you may not be getting the full, I guess, picture of different mutations and so forth. We were predominantly, using white males in a clinical trial. And so that's one of the disparities in maybe that population. So some of them also have a little bit less access to health care coverage, and that's also a big issue there. So I would say, as long as there's good health care coverage, they are covering the genetic testing, but if they don't have good coverage, that's a whole other issue. And I don't know if anyone has anything to add on other areas.
Oh.
So always linked with the microbiome characteristic, I would like to have that personalized medicine in our case, not necessarily the intention to develop specific medicine or drugs for a specific target of population. But in some cases, we observe that some patients do not respond to some drugs or therapy. This is the case for immunotherapy. We observe in the population that some non-responders do not respond to immunotherapy because our microbiome has specific characteristics, such as the lack of good bacteria, if I can see that. So we can envision in this context to supplement the patient before with making beneficial bacteria, and then when we observe the therapy in order to know if now they respond better to the medicine. So this is another way of action.
Yes?
Yes, it's working.
Yes, it's working. Okay. So my question was maybe regarding to your answer, because you mentioned that if the health coverage is good enough, that it does it, then it's good. But in my idea, that's not really true, because if it gets more and more expensive, the health insurance companies will give more money to like your personal treatments, and there's less money for other things. And maybe if it gets too expensive, they will exclude it from it. So yeah, yeah. What do you think about that? Are you still looking for to make it like more cheaper, or do you think as long as they cover it, it's good?
So, I definitely do think overall there's a lot of work to be done to make things less expensive for the healthcare system overall. I think, in the U.S. we have astronomical costs, especially in comparison with a lot of other countries. But I do think, in general, so if, let's say, you have a patient and you perform genetic testing and you know then that this particular drug that will target these mutations, if you know it's going to work for them, then I think overall that can save the healthcare system money than trying a therapy that may or may not work for them. So, if you have a drug that's $10,000 a month, and you haven't done the testing, and you just give it to them for renal cell carcinoma, and it doesn't work, then you've wasted time and you've wasted money. But if you have this testing, you know they have this mutation, and you know you have this specific drug that's going to target that mutation, I do think while there's a lot of work to be done, that overall it can save the system.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Maybe now, Dr. Lucas.
Not for the personalized medicine, because I have a very vague idea. So
Okay, so now we have one more question from Slido. From your personal experience, to what extent should pharmacists be taught about omics in their curricula?
So from my experience as a pharmacist, when I was doing my PhD under the supervision of Professor Demetrius, I was working for quite a long time, also on omic techniques um, at the National Hellenic Research Foundation, which is right around the corner actually. And I was working with a French guy, a pharmacist too, who was doing at that time his postdoc after doing a PhD. And he was also working on transcriptomics that period, and he had not been taught at all during his curriculum nor in his PhD these techniques or this side of molecular biology. And while we were having a beer, he told me, okay, the good thing about us pharmacists is that we don't know anything at all, but we can learn everything in 2 seconds. So this is actually true. So to respond directly to the question, of course, a general idea, a very solid basis on biochemistry and molecular biology is essential for pharmacists. Anyway, the whole field of biology is anyways in the core of the studies. But as things are evolving so much, a general idea, maybe some laboratory part, like for example, us, we're having a lot of students doing internships, and they have never been in touch with cell culture. So the basics of all this, so the background, I think nowadays is essential for a pharmacist. But I was taught cell culture and omics and everything during my PhD, and literally took me 2 weeks to get into it to a large extent. And of course, we'll never be as efficient as biologists in this field. But the crucial thing about pharmacists is exactly what this French guy said, is that we have a very specific, thorough knowledge of the whole health field and the clear intersection between chemistry, biology, and the human body that no other curriculum, no other studies can offer. So in this very general and very wide field, each one can make a focus perhaps later on in the career, but by having a background during the core studies.
I think that if you envision to do a career in the industry, it is essential to know and to handle this new tool, because this technology will allow you to interpret and analyze the data of interaction between the drug and the host. So if you want to work in the industry as a drug developer, I think it's a new and essential tool to know for the interpretation of all the data that you have in the
Okay, thank you. We have one more question from Slido. This is to all speakers. And what target do you currently think is most interesting to investigate using omics technologies? Maybe we'll start from Dr. Ginger.
So I think the current research that we're doing and just finding more and more targetable mutations in cancer is the most interesting to me right now. I also do think that some of the research that you're doing has been really interesting. We do have, I know like in the Anderson Cancer Center in the U.S. has a whole department studying the microbiome and cancer. And in one case, said it does affect the way patients may respond to immunotherapy. And there's some other areas as well. So I think the microbiome in cancer is an area that I find fascinating.
So for me, there is no one target most important than another one, because omics offer a large variety of sperm analysis. For instance, doing metagenomics is really important to know if one drug has downstream impacts on some characteristics such as microbiome composition, because as I presented, they can be have a lot of consequences on human health, but it's also very powerful for personalized medicine to use metagenomics in order to know if one metabolite is produced in response to one drug and to assess the efficacy of the treatment and the good response. So there is no one important target, but all methodology offer a range of interesting results.
Exactly, I totally agree. And the issue is how you can combine all different technologies in order to extract this piece of information, which is crucial actually for the actual target, which is the better state of health of the patient, or the proactive measures on health populations, etc. But what is a real breakthrough is really this part of metagenomics, because now with this tool, because with the other omic techniques, we had at least an idea, but the real breakthrough was with metagenomics, because we actually learned as a humanity up to what extent we have outsourced our biochemical pathways as organisms to microbes, and this is a very, very crucial information that extends from the way we give birth to children, to force medicines, and to actually to how we wash our hands. And I assure you, being in the personal care industry, that in 10 years from now we will wash ourselves in a totally different way. This is because of our digging into metagenomics and knowing what the trillions of other organisms that live simultaneously with us, what they need and to what extent they control and help our systems be healthy and alive.
Thank you for your questions. We have another question from the room.
Excuse me from me, I should leave here because I have another appointment. So thank you very, very much for having me here. I think I will also see many of you at the lab last night, because I will be having, I guess, we're discussing and organizing for me the live performance show, because I work also as a musician, working on also with bio arts, so using many omic techniques. Actually, afterwards I have a meeting at the Agricultural University of Athens, where we keep the cell lines, where we do the sonar experiments with sound. I use also artificial intelligence, and the people from the organizing community thought it would be interesting. So I'll probably have a small set of 45 minutes. So I'll see many of you on Saturday. But for the moment, I need to go to the cells.
Thank you, Dr. Giovanni. And now we'll go to the next question from the audience.
Thank you, first of all three of you, for your great presentations on a topic which I finished my studies, so I learned about it around last year. My question, I have two questions actually. The first one is a bit more general regarding when, for example, I was introduced to omics for the first time. I saw a lot of graphs, a lot of data, so I was asking myself the question, Yes, I can understand that it'd be very useful to help professionals as us, doctors, etc. But do you think that's mainly, I got the feeling that's mainly driven by statisticians because, okay, data, you have a lot of data, but, they're the ones who sort of try and put it together in a way that can be interpreted by us. So do you think that in terms of a career opportunity, it would be a bit more suited to statisticians than pharmacists, or sort of 50-50?
So there are two. There are several components to take into account because the pharmacist do not the same job than the statistician. The statistician is really formed to analyze data. So in general, when you work with a statistician, you ask him to do an analysis to answer to a specific question, and the statistician does the analysis. But the statistician alone, in my opinion, is not able to interpret all the data coming from the omics technology. It is perfectly able to interpret statistics analysis at the end of the workflow of analysis, but all the components and the data before, he doesn't have knowledge to interpret the data and to confront the result of statistics with the data at the beginning of the workflow that are the clinical data. And as pharmacists, I think you have the knowledge to analyze, especially to interpret the data from the clinical part to the result obtained by the statistician. So it's not a way better than the other one, but it's still combination of both knowledge. So pharmacists need to work with a statistician and vice versa.
I would agree. I think, and again, I'm speaking mainly from the oncology world, that it's really a team approach that we take. So we may have lab professionals who have a master's in research of statistics. And then I do think the pharmacist is perfectly suitable to interpret that data, and you know the drugs best, more than anyone on this team. Again, we have a lot of nurse practitioners in the U.S. and physician assistants that also are doing the counseling, and they're the ones who are able to speak to patients. So I do think there are multiple roles that take part, and it is a team approach. But I do think the pharmacists, as far as interpreting data and applying it where drugs are concerned, are great suited for that role.
That's a very good point for some of us who want to do omics in the future. Okay, thank you. My second question is regarding the possibility of us to, once we have the data, once we've identified, for example, within the genetic makeup of the patients, once we share it with insurance companies, for example, do you think that there's still the risk that, despite the patients even knowing, in the genetic makeup that they might develop, I don't know, breast cancer or some other type of disease, that any insurance company sees it like, ooh, this might cost us way too much in the future, so we unfortunately have to refuse to cover your treatment?
I think it can be a double-edged sword. So I think, if you know up front that they may have that mutation, you can better survey them and monitor them and perhaps prevent it from developing. That could, in the end, save the insurance company money. But I do know we are working on legislation in the U.S. and we have some currently, but probably need more just for what you said to protect those patients. I may have had a screening done and there's a mutation that we don't know about yet, and then what happens in 10 years when we discover that mutation leads to a different kind of cancer. So I do think you're correct. And at least in the US, I think it's going to have to be protected by legislation.
Thank you. Questions and answers. We will be taking the last questions because we are running out of time. So anyone from audience? There we have.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask you about more like personalized medicine. So, since most of advanced therapies are pretty expensive, whether they are covered by like corporate interests to develop a drug or a therapy to later sell it, or whether they're like government funded, it still usually takes a lot of money. And do you think that to some extent, more advanced therapies could um, like if they take money from the same pool of money, could they perhaps increase the socioeconomic gap? So that money could be, you see, it could be taken like, it could take, I lost my English. Like could it be done from the expense of uh, probably more complete basic health coverage? If you get the question, thanks so much.
May have some of the so again, I'm not really the economics expert, but I do think in the U.S., it's expensive, obviously, and a lot of money is poured into industry. So possibly it could, if they're developing a drug for some type of rare cancer that's taken away from more basic diseases that need more study, possibly. I don't have a great answer for you though. And yeah, something to consider definitely. Great question.
Yes, okay. So then we will yield the floor to the president, because he has hand up as well. Thank you so much for your presentations. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Lee, you mentioned the possibility of including omics in the benefit risk evaluation, and I wanted to ask how you envision this from a regulatory standpoint, because oftentimes the regulation behind the evaluation and approval of medicines is very one size fits all.
That's a very complex question because it's a very for the microbiome research, for instance. And now we observe that several drugs impact negatively the microbiome condition and motion. So now we know we need to implement this kind of analysis in the benefit-risk ratio in the future drug development, but we have on the market a lot of drugs that escape this kind of assessment. So I think it's a complicated question. I don't have the answer, but obviously in the future we need to take into account these parameters in the benefit-risk ratio. How? I don't know, because we have responder, non-responder, for several, even all drugs. So I let the regulatory expert answer this question, but it's a complex field. That's about it.
Okay, so I think it was the last question. Thank you a lot once again for your presentations and answers, and big applause. We will be finishing now the panel discussion. Our speakers also deliver workshops. So if you register for it, you can also talk during workshops. And now we will I will give floor to our two students, and also they will be able to share their perspective. And we will start with Katarina Silva, who's the Vice President of European IFRS, and she will present the outcomes of a study on omics in pharmaceutical curricula.
Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. I am Katina Silva, I'm the Vice President of European Affairs for EFSA, from Portugal. I'm a fifth-year pharmaceutical student, almost finishing and becoming a pharmacist. The only thing that's remaining is submitting and presenting my thesis, so the easiest part, I guess. Today, I'm going to be presenting a report that we did on a survey regarding the implementation of omics in the pharmaceutical curricula. So, when talking with Tasha, the Vice President of European Affairs, the Vice President of Education, sorry, we thought that it could be useful to also assess which was the degree of knowledge that students have had across Europe on omics and how much did they learn about omics during their degree. So we made a survey together and we released the survey with our APRs, which are the representatives of our members that work with us in advocacy. And we asked them to share this survey with students that they represent. So this survey was carried out between the 15th of October and the 28th of October. And what we wanted to achieve, and the goal with the survey, was to assess the knowledge that you had with omics, and if this was a subject that you learned about during your pharmaceutical degree, or if you touched upon this in any of the subjects that you learned about during your course. So we had 139 responses from 17 European countries. These are the countries that submitted responses to us. So we have quite a few representation in terms of the countries that we represent in EFSA. And we could gather as well some responses and some feedback from you, from students, on the knowledge of omics. So as you can see, some basic general information that we have besides the countries that have been working with us on the survey. We have as well some distribution in terms of students that have replied to the survey. So mainly the students replying were from second and third year. Then we have as well representation from fourth, fifth year, sixth year, and we have as well PhD and recently graduated students giving information about the knowledge of omics. So the first question that we asked students is if they have ever been introduced to omics. This was in general, not specifically regarding their pharmaceutical degree. And there was no significant difference between the students that did know about omics and the ones that didn't. So, I mean, the majority of students, I wouldn't say know about omics, but the thing is, most of them and the ones that replied that they did know about omics, there's not such a big difference between learning about them during their pharmaceutical degree or outside the pharmaceutical degree. And this is what is a little bit devastating to know, because I mean, since it is a subject that is so important in regards to biology and people that do want to pursue like the research field, some career in investigation, we were expecting that students that didn't know about omics would have been introduced to them more often in the pharmaceutical degree. We also asked students if they were introduced to omics during the pharmaceutical degree. In which sense were they introduced to it? Some were during some specific subjects. It was not like a specific subject only to omics, but in the different subjects they were introduced to omics. Then some said it was discussed in mandatory subjects, and others said that it was discussed only in optional subjects that you can take throughout your course. And then comes the fundamental question of this survey, which is it important? Is it fundamental? Should it be included in the pharmaceutical curricula? And here we see that the majority of students, around 88% of students that replied to the survey, said yes, it should be included in the pharmaceutical curricula. We also asked why do they think it should be included in the pharmaceutical curricula. And basically, amongst all the responses that we had, there were four main points that were obvious between all of the responses, which were the understanding of cell processes and the developing of new medicines, as we have heard as well today during the presentations of our speakers. It is important to the research field, and as you know, with pharmaceutical sciences, This is an optional path that you can take, professional path. It is a research field or an investigation. So some people that do want to pursue this path for their professional career do think it's important to have omics in pharmaceutical curricula. Then we have relevant comprehension of the profession and the future of pharmacy, and this links as well to developing new medicines, having personalized medicines to patients, and in general putting patients at the center of care. Then we asked on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the importance of studying omics in the pharmaceutical degree? And I mean, the results are pretty obvious. There are a few people that think it isn't so important to study and it isn't so important to be introduced to omics during their course, but most students do think there's a substantial importance about studying omics during their pharmaceutical degree and including this subject in their course and implementing new ways and new measures of being introduced to omics in the pharmaceutical curriculum. Then we ask students if, okay, then it's important to include it in the pharmaceutical curricula. When, where should we put the subject? Should we create a new subject just for omics? Some students think so. And some other students think because of the connection and relation it has with biology, microbiology, genomics, pharmacology, it could be included in other subjects that are already in the pharmaceutical degree. And then from all the responses, close to 71% of the students think that this could impact them, learning about omics could impact their professional path after graduating. We also asked why do they think, to elaborate on this, and most of them said that it could have a better approach to developing medicines, the research in drug discovery, and as well innovative ideas for the pharmaceutical industry. So we know that a lot of the students that are currently in the pharmaceutical course or studying pharmacy, they do intend to pursue a professional path on research on industry. So these students do think it's very important for them after graduating to include omics in the pharmaceutical curricula so that they have better knowledge, better understanding of this, and this could help them develop new drugs, could help in drug discovery, and even in a industry path if you would want to pursue that. And then to finalize the survey, we asked one last question, which were other relevant inputs that students might have regarding omics. And I quoted here two important responses, I think. The first one says, omics may or may not be mandatory for earning a pharmacy degree. However, a sufficient amount of information regarding omics should be included in the pharmaceutical curricula. Omics could be introduced in an elective lesson during pharmacy education. So this is a way of putting omics in the pharmaceutical curricula, so maybe in an optional course, instead of being mandatory to earning your pharmacy degree, because at the end of the day, some students find it more important than others to have omics being represented in the curricula. And then we have another testimony that says, I think that the basics of it should be taught in one of the courses of the curricula. An optional course about omics would also exist, so that students that are interested in it can learn more about this subject. So these are, I would say, some kind of recommendations from students, from the respondents that we had, about how to introduce omics in the pharmaceutical curricula. And one of the main aspects that were said was to maybe have an optional course, an optional lesson on this during the pharmaceutical curricula. And then to finalize my presentation, we have some conclusions regarding the survey that we sent. So, as you can see, after the respondents that had replied to our survey mentioned that they did find contact and they were introduced to omics during before this survey was conducted, but not even half of them said that they were introduced to this topic during the pharmaceutical degree. So maybe they heard about it before, they are interested in science and they did learn about it eventually, but not introduced to it during their pharmaceutical degree. And this becomes a little, it needs some attention because more than 87% of students, inclusively the ones that did reply to the survey, find that it is very important to have omics implemented in the pharmaceutical curricula, and that they consider that this subject is very important for their education as pharmacists and for the better understanding of the pharmacy profession. And finally, we have around 70% of the students that also reply to the survey saying that for them it means a lot to have omics expressed in the pharmaceutical curricula, as it will impact massively their professional path after graduating. So this is all for me, a little report that we did, and it's important to do these types of surveys about these types of topics and points that you find attractive and that you find that are missing from the pharmaceutical curricula. And based on this, we can then work with you and count on you to help us as well in finding ways to advocate for omics to be more expressed in the pharmaceutical curricula, as we see that is something that is needed for most of you and the professional paths that you want to pursue. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Karina, for presenting this data. Now we'll slightly change the topic. We'll be talking about mental health of students in higher education. And I would like to invite one of our member associations, ABER Portugal, and the liaison secretary of ABER, José Montillo.
So, okay. Hi everyone, it's so nice to see you. As Cassius told you, I'm José Montillo. I'm 20 years old and I'm from Porto, in Portugal. I'm currently in my fourth year studies in my university, which is University of Porto in the Faculty of Pharmacy. I'm currently the liaison secretary for APEF Portugal, and I'll be here talking with you a little bit about my association and also about the work we've been doing last year. So, APEF stands for Portuguese Pharmaceutical Students Association. We were born in 1998. We currently represent 8 member associations, which are spread in 5 cities, and we represent more than 5,500 students. So our focus are mainly advocacy, public health, and education. In the advocacy side, we really focus on pharmaceutical education, health sciences, which are topics like vaccination, for example, and also professional careers to try to improve our students' preparation for these professional stuff. Also, regarding public health, we focus on mental health, vaccination, and non-prescription medicines, and we do a lot of public health campaigns, and we try to promote these alongside our students as well. And regarding education, we provide our students with internships, with training opportunities, capacitation opportunities, and also with some science for them. Our main projects and initiatives, we have our National Congress, the Educational Forum, the National Encounter of Students, our APEF Social, which is basically an activity when students can volunteer themselves to help older people and also children in more local towns. We also realize a lot of public health campaigns, and also our Pharmaceutical Education Forum, which is a forum where we usually present some advocacy-related outcomes that we were able to gather through the mandate. So, I'm talking of a project that is developed in the Portuguese National Health Students Forum. This is basically a forum made of national students associations. So it's the National Medical Students Association, APEF, the National Nutrition Students Association, Psychology, Veterinary Medicine, Nursing, and also dental students. And we usually work together to try to advocate for more stuff around One Health, for example, and problems that usually impact all students' health. So, but why mental health? For us, this is an imperative matter to talk and to tackle right now, and I'll show you why. We conducted a survey on 2019 and we collected some data that I'll be presenting for you. and we collected that 36% of 1,008 students that replied to this survey said that they have already been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. So 42% of them said that they were diagnosed with anxiety, 17% with depression, and 26% of them with both anxiety and depression. 54% of the ones that said that they were diagnosed with some mental health disorders, 54% of them keep their diagnosis nowadays, and 22% are not sure if they do, which means that they are probably not being followed up by a psychologist or a psychiatrist or any healthcare professional in general. 80% of them stated that this was developed during their studies in higher education. So this is also a big struggle for us. Also, most of the students feel stressed during their studies. So this is a very common feeling for all of them. And only 66 out of the 1,008 students that replied to it feels to be enoughly resilient to study in a higher education institution. Also, 304,033 students in public higher education institutions. That's the total number that we have in Portugal. And for those students, we only have 36 psychological support offices and also 58 active psychologists. What does this mean? So regarding psychological support, the Portuguese Psychological Society recommends a ratio of one psychologist per 500 students. And I need some maths for you. And we have 58 psychologists. And if it's like one psychologist per 500 students, then we have enough psychologists to follow up on 29,000 students. But we have 304,733. So it is divided by the 5 students that should be followed by one psychologist. We would need so around 609 psychologists to just be able to deal with all of this. So in this graphic, you can see what we have currently, like on your left, and on the right, what we would need to actually give a response to the students' needs. So what should we do now after gathering this data and analyzing it? So we should reevaluate the number of psychologists available and assure that the offices that we have are actually functioning and that we are implementing some more to just help our students, and also increase the communication within these meetings, because we noticed that even in the offices that we already have, the communication links between them were not enough to provide help to our students. So we should also evaluate magnitude of these concerns in each faculty while investigating different factors that vary from faculty to faculty, because even though we represent people from, like we survey people from all over the country, we notice that there are a lot of differences between each university, so we should also focus on that to just be able to understand where we should focus on. And we should also encourage learning and working conditions that promote a healthy living, because that's something that, as we already saw, it's not happening in higher education institutions. And finally, increase investment in mental health and mental health education, because we're noticing that sometimes we do not have enough resources to invest in this, but this should be a priority for our students to assure that they are actually learning and actually becoming good professionals, because no one that is mentally ill can have like the same results as a person that is not mentally ill, as you probably may know. And for this, we also are advocating to provide free access to mental health care services to every single student in each faculty of our country. That's one of our lines. So now we should keep up on the results of the survey and what are we doing. For that, we proposed this document. So FNASH, which is the National Health Students Forum, proposed it with its member associations. And it was also subscribed by 13 local health students associations. We directed it to the Science, Technology, and Higher Education Ministry, the Health Ministry, the Council of Deans of Portuguese Universities, the Coordinator Council of Polytechnic Higher Institutions as well, and the Director General for Higher Education, because these are the decision makers that we were trying to approach and that we recognize that are able actually to make the change. This was also acknowledged by political parties with parliamentary seats, the Directorate General for Health, the National Network of Higher Education Psychological Support Services, because they are partnering up with us sometimes to advocate for this matter, because this is also an important matter for them. And we only have one step left, which is just try to keeping up with the results and see if they're actually implementing something. So that was our work on in this regard. I don't know if any of you has any questions for this project. Okay, I don't think so. So I'm just ending my presentation. Thank you very much. If you do have some questions, you can also email me, and I'll be glad to just reply.